Welcome to New Game Plus, a retro gaming podcast where three guys spend 7 days playing one old game and then we talk about it. My name's Dustin.
My name's Kenny.
Nolan.
And this is episode 332. And there's no E3 this year, but we did just get PlayStation's State of Play, Sony's State of Play. And while they're, in my opinion, they didn't show anything like incredibly groundbreaking.
Yeah.
We did see some new stuff on Final Fantasy 16, on Street Fighter 6, Resident Evil 4, the remake.
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't know that.
Right. I just remember that you were going through the Resident Evil.
Any games at all that aren't from a established franchise already? Does everything that they highlighted have a number at the end of it?
No, but they look bad.
So I wanted to start with those before I let you just talk. Because Kenny, yes, there are some other stuff, even some like relatively indie kind of things. I mean, some people, I don't remember what it's called, but are excited about this game where you play as a cat in a post-apocalyptic world with no humans.
Yes. I'll play that.
So that's an interesting thing. Kenny, but bigger, more exciting for you because for some reason you always go here. A few VR announcements, like VR specific games. You always think VR is the future. You still think that?
No, I do think it's sort of the next thing. I don't know.
It's
VR
here. What are you talking about? It's
confusing.
It is the future. Whether you like it or not. I don't like it, but it is the future.
All right. And so now, with all of that being said, opening up the platform, anything stick out to you?
Yeah, RE4. That fans have been wanting that for a long time because Resident Evil 4 is like the pinnacle. It's like the best one to a lot of people. I know that some like 2 better. I personally think 2 is the best one, but that's super exciting. Because previously it was on GameCube, and it's like you can play it, but a remake would be so sick because all the remakes so far have been top tier, and they just do it right. So I'm hype about that.
We've got a release date. Might not mean much in video game world, but March 24th, 2023. So it's still a bit away.
I can wait. That's fine.
But we did get a brief teaser trailer that, I mean, shows that the game is much like the original.
Do you see Leon?
Yeah, you do.
Nice.
Leon Kennedy.
I'm gonna have to watch it.
Yeah, because I think you'll like it. Anything else? I mean, Final Fantasy 16 obviously stood out to me. Final Fantasy is always going to stand out to me. I wasn't incredibly impressed by the trailer, but I am cautiously optimistic. I want to love it, and I probably will love it.
You probably will.
They're going kind of back to their fantasy roots with this one, right?
Yeah, so they haven't like done hardcore traditional medieval-esque fantasy for a while now, and it seems like they're going back there. We still haven't had tons on the storyline, but it does. What I do know about the story, what it does seem like, is that your character is an icon, or has the icon ability where he can turn into a summon or turn into an icon.
It sounds
Ifrit.
like
Ifrit. And that he has to go around and I think defeat and then become partners with the other icons in order to like either save or take out the crystals. It's one of those things.
It sounds cool. And there's no skyscraper. So yeah, it's not sci-fi or shouldn't be sci-fi. I think it could be good. I just wish the main character wasn't Noctis.
Yeah, I'm not impressed by the main character yet. His look, his voice, anything like that. He seems like a cardboard cutout.
Yeah.
But still, Final Fantasy 16, I'm excited about that. So it's got me trembling, and it has left me shook just watching those things. It's an earthquake pun, Kenny. They don't crack you up? Okay. I apologize for the sarcasm.
Yeah.
In our retro game of the week, those were 4. I think those were 4 different puns.
Stop.
Quake 4.
Overview.
Quake 4 is the follow-up to Quake, and then Quake 2.
Yeah.
And then Quake 3. And now this one's Quake 4.
I like that you know how numbers work.
I also respect that they didn't do little subtitles like Quake 4, The Return of Quake 3. You know how like...
Hey, I do have a question. when it comes to numbering games,
Yeah.
do you prefer the Roman alphanumeric numbers? That's not. Do you prefer 1, 2, 3, and 4, or do you prefer the Roman numeral 1, 2, 3, 4, or anything else?
Depends on the game, but I'm a Roman numeral boy, generally.
Yeah.
I have no preference. And Dustin, you like Roman numerals because of Final Fantasy.
Not just because of Final Fantasy, but I do
Well,
think it classically looks better.
It looks
but
good.
It's what Kenny said. It depends on the game. I think the number 4 works here for Quake 4.
I do too. It
Do
looks
we all
nice.
agree?
Yeah, it looks really nice.
Okay. It came out in 2005 for the PC, then for the Xbox 360. It is a first-person shooter, a military science fiction first-person shooter. It was developed by Raven Software and published by Activision. But I have some questions here because this is an id Software thing. Like Quake is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know what id's. Maybe it was a Raven Software id software collaboration, I think, or oversight. They provided oversight.
I think it was both of those things. So
Okay.
John Romero, the id guy that
Yeah.
created that company, found these two guys that had this Raven Software company. He knew them, and so I think
used
they
them. Okay.
oversaw the development. Their names attached to it, but these two guys and their team developed it.
The underlying engine as well is
Id. Yeah.
id.
Yeah, it's Doom
It-
3 engine.
So yeah, we named a couple
Quake
games
4
here.
engine.
id Software is Wolfenstein, Doom, Quake, and Commander Keen.
Happy-go-lucky Commander.
Which are all shooters.
Sure.
mean-
Yeah. I don't know.
I mean, not really.
And we played Quake, the original,
Yeah.
on the podcast, episode 69. It's
Nice.
been a while. Do you remember that?
I do actually. Yeah.
I do.
Did we play together? I want to say we did. We tried at least.
tried.
But the
It
servers are
was-
quite busted.
Yeah,
but
quite busted.
It was good.
And that game was known more so for its multiplayer.
Absolutely.
The Quake series is generally known for its multiplayer experience.
Yes.
However, Quake 2 had a robust story, narrative that you could go through. And then Quake 4, my understanding, is the heaviest story-based Quake of them all.
And it's a continuation of Quake 2's story, I believe.
Continuation of
Yeah.
Quake 2, because I believe Quake 3 was all arena. It was all
Arena,
multiplayer
yeah.
kind of experience.
And
Yep.
and that works well for us because
Sure.
the nature of our podcast, it's a lot easier to all go and play
Big time.
single player games than
Yeah.
having to coordinate and try and get multiplayer running. And definitely there's conversation to be had there because first person shooters, a lot of the appeal is playing with your friends, shooting each other, seeing who gets the most tea bags in, whatever else. But
Perfect.
but this one gave enough of a single player story experience that it stood on its own.
First person shooters. Can we talk about that just real quick? Are you a fan? Are you generally good? Do you enjoy them at large? The reason why I ask is because I have not historically considered myself a savant, I don't know, when it comes to first person shooters, but I'm realizing that I kind of like them. I'm not a multiplayer guy just in general, but if it has a good story, so I just played, I've told you guys off air and I've told the Discord community, like my wife and I just played Dead Space. It's a shooter.
Yeah.
It's not really first person. I think it's third person, but it's a shooter. But again, it's just the engine with which someone's telling a good story and giving a good atmosphere.
Yeah, it's kind of a bad example because that one's more like story, almost like horror survival kind of.
Yeah,
thing.
but you've got a gun.
You've got
and
a
a variety
gun.
of guns,
This-
and you're
okay.
shooting.
I throughout my life have changed my views on FPS and my enjoyment of them. I will
Okay.
randomly pick one up and be like, and just play it. Like without telling y'all, I'll just play this. Like Valorant, I played it when it came out, of course. I don't play it anymore. I have no desire to play an FPS right now. In general, I think my enjoyment level of FPS is quite low. So I just thinking about playing a competitive first-person shooter makes me upset because I get mad. They're hard, And they're just the genre is usually boring. Like it's military space shooters, like 30 of them, or it's like a realistic shooter, and I don't know. And I hate Call of Duty, so
I think it depends for me. I don't tend to like the hyper realistic types as much, or the
like Counter-Strike.
the fast pace. I don't like the Counter-Strike Battlefield style first person shooters very much. But there's a number of first person shooters that have played a very big role in my sort of like personal gaming history. Halo 2, Unreal Tournament, a few others that have been so fun.
Splatoon.
Half-Life.
I feel like Kenny would like Splatoon, actually.
I would probably love Splatoon. I have never played it, but it sounds like a game I would love. So I don't know. I do tend to like the campaigns when they're well done. I don't mind playing through a story as a shooter. I know you're kind of ambivalent, Nolan, but like that can be fun. But yes, I if you're gonna do it, you want to find a game that you can play multiplayer and play with people, ideally. So I don't know.
Which we've all together played Halo 2 before, right? Weren't we all doing that together, or was it just you and me? Nolan?
It was you,
Kenny
me, and Muffin
college,
Man,
and then me and Nolan and a different guy online.
and we played Capture the Flag online Halo 2 on PC.
Yeah,
and people
captured
cheated.
all the flags.
They just cheated like crazy, but we still played it and beat them.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
Okay, let me give the story of Quake 4. It continues the story of Quake 2 with a new protagonist. You play as the Marine Corporal Matthew Kane after a crash landing on the alien home planet of Strogos. And the remainder of the game has you fighting for survival horror, against the cyborg aliens known as the Strogg, and hopefully destroying and escaping the planet.
Halo?
That's
going to be the
sci-fi
joke the whole time.
Military sci-fi.
Yeah.
Gameplay.
The single player experience. Let's talk about that first, because in my mind, Quake has always been like PC multiplayer pinnacle. Like that's what they do best. And I don't even think or associate a single player campaign with Quake, but that's what we all did this week. I mean, I didn't play multiplayer at all. So, and I already made the joke. It's so obviously Halo in its setup and in its progression, and that's fine. It's what was Halo was selling well at the time. But it is very much like the same trope of this military guy, and it feels like it was written by a teenager that just learned about curse words. And you just go through fighting aliens, and to me, it felt familiar, but it did not feel Quake at all.
I've never been in the military, but I do think the military is actually like middle school boys that just learn curse words. Like, I think that's actually true.
I know, but I think it's worse than what we heard. And so it's just in between of like, damn, I stubbed my toe. That's a direct quote
that scene
from Quake 4.
Yeah. I remember that scene.
You know what is interesting, and I'm sure we'll probably talk about Halo a lot, unfortunately, for this game, but I've never played through the campaign of any Halo game. But I am a campaign-centric gamer. I don't like multiplayer. I like playing stories. I've never gone through the campaign of any first-person specific shooter other than some of the more recent Doom incarnations.
Right, and those are focused more than previous.
Focused. Yes, big time.
And I think it's okay and makes sense that you missed out on the Halo campaign. I do think it's rare because people were all about that Halo campaign. Yes, the multiplayer is still the highlight. It's what people remember. It's the iconic part of Halo. But that was like the turning point where FPS games, Halo kind of was like, no, we're going to do this single player thing and it's going to be good. I don't think you missed both. A lot. I'm sorry with Halo campaign. I know, Kenny, shut up. Halo campaign's fine. I'm not a huge Halo campaign guy, but like you can miss it and still be okay. With this game, I think you have to play the single player.
Well,
with Quake 4 in
sure.
particular,
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's sort of the focus, and intentionally so. I'm going to agree with you about one thing
He's
and then
mad.
disagree with you hard about the other.
Sure.
I agree this game does not feel like Quake anymore. You said that earlier. They went this whole like space sci-fi kind of horror-y vibe that sort of keeps some of that like monstrosity of the enemies that you get from the original Quake, but the original Quake is not this. It's not
Sure.
sci-fi, And so that felt strange to me, jumping from what I remembered of the original one to this. But your take on the Halo campaigns is hot garbage. They were excellent.
The other thing that doesn't feel Quake to me outside of the like tone and stuff is it just me, or was this way too slow for a Quake game in terms of movement and just control over your character? I remember Quake 1 and 2 being fast.
Yeah, really fast.
Very
fast, and that's
twitchy. Yeah.
But that's their thing. Like that's what they're known for. Like speedrunners, like the speedrunning community as a whole kind of got its roots in Quake speedruns. And this one was
that's not what this is.
No, I got dropped in. I was like, yo, this is like slow, like Call of Duty slow.
I think they slowed it down on purpose though, because this game focuses really hard on storytelling, like via the experience. You're not getting a ton of cutscenes explanation. It's not like this sort of dropped on you narrative. You're going through it, and so you're being given specific quests from people, and they're talking to you and telling you what you need to do. They're explaining and showing in the world around you what's going on and what you need to be focused on and why. And so it's this sort of, I don't know, they're going for this very realistic, I mean, obviously not realistic, but sort of immersive kind of story-driven version of telling an FPS, and I think it works here for me.
And see, that's where I differ, because like I mentioned, I think I kind of like some first-person shooters or shooters, but not when they are erring on the side of realistic.
Yeah.
Call of Duty is, I've never, to be honest, I've never played through a campaign there.
You'd hate it.
But it does not interest me in the slightest. Halo a little bit more, because we're sci-fi, we're not realistic. Like that is, I'm jumping around with a laser sword, and taking people out. This one, does have the more realistic slant, where I did at times feel like, I'm playing Call of Duty just with cyborg aliens.
It's odd. It was odd. What they did bring over were some of the weapons that you would recognize from the early
nail
games.
gun.
Yeah, and they looked good. Like they felt good to shoot. I just think, again, because of the way that you're maneuvering around the stages, it's like it's very linear, and of course it's on rails, so to speak, like a lot of those campaigns are, but it's like scripted events, and so the pacing of it, again, so slow, and so I forget that I have this like amazing weapon that I can like do rocket jumps with and like cool stuff like that, because it feels less sandboxy than a multiplayer arena.
Yeah, I don't mind linear. Give me Final Fantasy 13 every day. Like, I don't care if I've got even hallways or linear, as long as you're telling a good story.
Yeah.
The thing here is, it wasn't just linear. You mentioned on rails, and there are literal times where you're on rails
Yes.
for a long time. One of the massive sins here, I felt, is that when you get vehicles in games like this, that should be some of the coolest moments
Halo.
in the game. And here, it was some of the most tedious,
worst.
boring moments in the game. And it took so long. I was on this caravan for what felt like a half hour and not doing anything unique or special, not even being able to move, just frozen in place, shooting over and over again. It was some of the least fun moments of the game. And the story was so on rails that, yeah, there was no exploration. I felt like even in Halo, and I've seen some of the Halo 2, and played even some of the Halo 2, story campaign mode. And it's more like, hey, here's the massive environment or room that you're in. Now, do the fight in the way that you want to, or take out the enemies in the way that you want to, move around. It wasn't like that for the most of the part here. It was hallway after hallway after hallway where you're fighting, in my opinion, the same enemy over and over and over again.
Yeah. Very tedious. And like story progression was there. Clearly they wanted you to like care about the story, but I really found it challenging when again, the dialogue is just abysmally just there. Like but
it is voice acted.
It is, and that helps. But again, when they're just saying like I don't
keep cursing on our podcast.
I know, I'm not going to curse, but it's just like, I don't know. The story felt stolen from other games I won't mention. I don't know, man. I don't know. It just, going through the story, I didn't gain enjoyment in learning about the characters or making progress. It was just like, okay, what's next? Like, let's see.
You just mentioned it. One of the cool things about Quake 4 that is different from Quake is that you're not just this solo soldier out on a job. You're working with a squad. And so, Nolan, I think you kind of gave your thoughts and opinions there. I'd love to hear Kenny's, and I'll share mine.
Sure.
When it comes to working with the squad mates, because you're given a team, you're a part of the Raven, like you join up with the Raven forces, or is it Raven, or is that's just the...
No, you're part of Rhino. There is a Raven squad at one point that you meet, but you're on Rhino.
You're on Rhino. Well, you team up with a group of soldiers, and you work with them throughout various missions. And even in the downtime between missions, you're kind of like interacting with them back at a base or something like that. Kenny, did you ever get connected to any of your other squad mates?
I don't know. There's a lot of room for where the story is going to go, and I didn't get completely through this game this week, but I didn't think it spent a lot of time trying to get you like relationally connected to these other people.
Right.
But it did give you a variety of faces, and the experience of sort of giving you some of that realism when you first get on your ship and walk around, and it's got everyone doing their actual jobs and talking through their day-to-day tasks. And I know you guys kind of aren't vibing it, but I loved the immersion here, and I loved what they were trying to do to make it feel like this was an actual thing going on. And because they did that, then the beats of like crazy scary monsters jumping out at you, which I know is like whatever, every game does that, and maybe they weren't the scariest of all the scary monsters we've had jump out at us in games. Or when you get to other really traumatic events that kind of happen along the way, because it's felt realistic, those hit harder than they would have if they hadn't immersed you. And so I thought they did a pretty good job on some of that.
I cared nothing about any of my squad mates.
And you know what? I think that was them trying to simulate team deathmatch, like multiplayer, the side of multiplayer that you are missing by playing single player. They're like, this is like your teammates that you usually play with. It's like, no.
Yeah.
It's not.
Again, I'm not playing first-person shooters for the first-person shooting action. I'm playing for the story. And when when the teammates I have no feelings for, so whenever something does happen to them, I'm like, who were they anyways? It doesn't, like, I feel like they could have used some narrative moments in between breaks or whatever to help build out some of the characters, to help you care about them a little bit more. They didn't do that. And I know this isn't a well, I was about to say I know this isn't a story-first game, but in the series, this is the more story-first game than the others.
It feels like they were going pretty story-heavy. I don't know. I'm sticking to my guns here.
They were trying.
My machine guns.
Gun.
Yeah.
Nail.
Take your pick.
Right.
Shotgun. But I kind of liked that there were some characters who had unique personality, and you even had that moment in the first play, Dustin, where you walked out and that guy just picked up a shotgun and like shot an alien in the head like it was no big deal, and you're like, this guy's a BA, and then he is the whole time. And each of the characters does have some distinct personality. I know maybe you didn't care about them. I don't know. I thought they did a pretty good job of telling a story by just plopping you into it and giving you context and not hand feeding you a story. And that, I don't know. I think we got really different takes on this one.
So the multiplayer side, I think we don't have to spend a lot of time here because, again, they didn't focus on it. The servers are quite dead. I tried to play online, and there are other problems besides just player availability, but no one was playing. I'm wondering if we would have all played multiplayer, if it would have felt more like familiar, like a Quake game, or if really they just spent all their resources on trying to make this a single player experience.
And maybe this is more of a conversation to have in the aged section, because I think that one of the problems with multiplayer games, particularly those based on a client-server architecture, age poorly often. And you get that here. I think that it's not preserved. It's not loved. Like, I hate to keep making the comparison, but I remember when the Halo 2 servers were finally taken down. But how even at the end there were 2-3 people in there at a time. So that's just how it degrades over time. And so I think it's a lot more difficult to play multiplayer on Quake 4 in particular in 2022, of course, than it was in 2005, 2006.
Even in 2005, 2006, the multiplayer here, though it existed, didn't have a ton of legs. When you're a multiplayer game and a big franchise multiplayer game, what you want to do is get known, get a huge player base, get popular, do things like esports, and get people talking about your game and playing competitively. And if you look at the history of Quake 4's sort of attempts to get into that scene, they showed up in a couple of tournaments, but for 2 years after the game came out. And that was it.
Wow.
It was like this little flash in the pan, and then it was dead.
I bet Quake 3 Arena was the one that was still being played in those tournaments because it was the multiplayer that people liked.
I'm not sure on the comparison, but it didn't take off like you would want a first-person shooter title to do.
I know that reviewers at the time of its release criticized the multiplayer, saying stuff like it's uninspired, and it's. I even know that John Romero expressed his disappointment over the direction of Quake 4, of the multiplayer of Quake 4. Yeah, I know. You don't want that to happen, and it did. And so it's unfortunate because I think they just missed. I don't know why they went this direction, because I feel like if they would have had a finger on the pulse of the Quake community at the time, they would have known, hey, screw story mode. Let's make better multiplayer. Of course, maybe we would have had even more aging issues today, because if it was just multiplayer, like Quake 3, I don't even know if it's on our retro master list, because people are I'm not entirely sure, because I think that one's entirely arena based, and to play that today might be more difficult than being able to play a campaign. So I'm glad we were able to play it, but it's not what the community wanted at the time.
I don't think so. It's different.
It doesn't seem like it's what they wanted. I do have a question about the story. I thought it was interesting, and I'm sure that other games have done this before. Halo may have even done this. I like the moral setup quandary, because typically, right, we're on Earth or near Earth defending Earth from the aliens. Mm-hmm. But in this game, we are the aliens terrorizing another planet. Like, we're landing on their planet and trying to kill all of them. I thought that was interesting, problematic, interesting.
Yeah, it's a different spin.
Put down Ender's Game and just play the title for the story that it is.
I would love our character to find a Strog egg and take it off planet to try to
and speaks to it telepathically and has sex with it.
I mean, he's got more.
That happens in Ender's Game, right?
He's got more connection to the Strog than a lot of people do by the end of this thing.
Okay, you keep teasing it. I'm gonna say it. It's a spoiler. It's a spoiler, but it's a big part of the game. And I do want to bring something up. So about a third of the way through, Nolan, and it's a good amount of hours into it. So you can play. I think it's over 10 chapters into it or whatever. So it takes a while. But you are captured by the Strog, and you're half turned into one of them. Okay? Which, in my opinion, should change dramatically what you're able to do in the game.
You get faster like original Quake.
You get faster like original Quake.
Oh, you do?
You do. Yes,
oh, I was joking.
Yes, you
okay.
do. That's the one thing that happens, and your HP increases a little. Other than that, nothing else changes. You're still using the same guns. They could have done a lot there, and they don't.
Yikes.
There's some story beats that change, and
Quit helping it, Kenny.
Yeah, he's really defending.
Quit helping it.
I will say that scene that happens was traumatic.
You
and
cried?
I don't want to ever go to Strogos.
Strogville.
Don't
Strogville.
worry. We've done away with that place.
Aged.
I think the graphics, once set correctly, are good.
What does that mean?
Okay. Oh, Nolan. So talking about aged, you can't just download this game off of Steam or GOG and it work with modern computers. You can play it, but for some reason it's got even if you change all the graphical setting to high, it doesn't. It keeps everything on the worst textures I've ever seen. So when the first play started and I see this guy floating across space and the textures look so bad, I was amazed that this was a 2005 title. I was because I thought it was the highest graphics that it had to offer.
Until now, I thought that's what the game looked like.
Right.
Yeah, I was about to rip it apart. So modern PCs don't like it.
Correct. So you have to go into it's not difficult, but it is annoying. You have to go into the config file and you have to change a few of the settings there so that the game registers your graphic commands properly.
I should have done that. Like, what am I looking at, dude?
Right. So it starts off very bad. I think it certainly does get better than what the first play shows. And the lighting in particular. I think one of the things, since they do have these hallway environments, really close environments, they were able to do lighting more than some of these other games of the time. And I thought those were pretty good. They had some good environments there.
I definitely think the lighting was like up there because that was it felt like a conglomeration of all these different genres. Like we want to do horror, and it's like, okay, I guess. But when they did it right, it worked. Like the lighting, there were some rooms that were like pitch black, with the exception of like a flickering light, or like you can't see around the corner you're about to go to, and it was effective. It was actually scary. So lighting, yes. Textures, no. Maybe when it's fully, like you said, if you set your configuration file. Was it good? That's my question. Was it actually good, or was it still like meh?
I think it was good. I don't think it was like stellar, but I do think it was good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So lighting's good, but dude, I played the whole time with no texture. It's like no texture. Calling it a texture is kind of wrong because it's just gray boxes. It's like worse than N64 at times.
Yeah.
So
I think because we play so many old games, generally I sometimes just like overlook that nonsense. Like it can be important, but I'm not playing a game for like, oh, was this the very best thing that could have been visually seen in 2005?
I never am either, but this was something else.
So I don't know, maybe I had things set up a little better, or maybe I just didn't care, but it didn't distract me too much. I still was able to get in and play and feel immersed, and it wasn't so bad that it was, gameplay breaking or distracting for me.
2005 is an interesting year to look at when it comes to the timeline of shooters, right? Because you had many shooters come out before this one, but I think it was around this era, and maybe in the years that followed, mainly, where shooters really came into their place. Remember, we played a lot of retro games on this podcast, and to have full control of your camera is a unique thing for this podcast. We haven't played a lot of games where we've been able to do that, right? Like, because retro, you don't have two sticks to be able to do that with.
Yeah.
But we have been able to play a few, and at this time, to be able to control your camera and control your character was very, very nice. We weren't able to do that in Quake very well, as easily.
Yeah.
And so it was in this era that first-person shooters were really coming into their own, but I don't know if it had happened yet, and I don't know if it had happened with Quake 4 in particular.
I think it had by now.
Okay.
I do, because even we're talking Quake 1, which has aged in terms of controlling, but if you're playing on PC, you can still strafe, like you can get around, and certainly in Quake 2 and 3. Like I think that it was established and it was already a thing. I think what we're seeing in 2005 and later was them evolving it to the next phase, which was, again, like we said, more focused on single player, more or less LAN type multiplayer and more online type server multiplayer. But again, on PC, we've been here at this point, and I think that they're getting away from what was working. That's my take on the FPS.
Yeah.
And military space shooters are fine, but in hindsight, like at the time they were cool, right? In hindsight, it's like overdone and dull to me. And so that's the part I think ages poorly, because it's so saturated. And yeah, we already had Halo. 2001 was Halo. So
maybe if this was console specific, then we'd be a little bit more forgiving. But since it's PC, it's like you should have been able to do more than this.
PC invented
Kenny disagrees
this,
because Kenny is obviously a Quake 4 boy, and he's been defending it this entire time.
Quinny loves Quake.
Quinny loves it.
I think PC was always more forgiving for first-person shooter, and it felt really comfortable, moving around, looking around, shooting. But yes, it's very different conversations when you're talking about playing these games on console because of just like input differences. But playing this week on PC, it's not like it felt like a old or problematic game. No. It felt comfortable. Like you run around, you jump, you shoot stuff. Like if I was almost worried for this podcast that we were just going to not have enough to talk about, not because there's not a lot here, but just because this game is so cookie cutter first person shooter. It's just everything that you've seen other places. And I don't know that that's bad. That can be fun. First person shooters are enjoyable, but it's just a PC first person shooter.
Yeah, that's true. I always had the same concern. Same thing.
To get it and play it a day is relatively inexpensive. It's $15, and that's when it's not on sale. You can get it on, like I mentioned earlier, Steam and GOG. You can play it easily. You do need to change the file a little bit if you want better graphics.
Or not.
And then you can also always download mods. There's a community that did come around this game, and you can download some mods. I don't know what all there is, but there is some like HD texture mods if you want it even better than what it should originally be. If you want to buy the game for your Xbox 360, it's $6 used, $25 new. So
$25 new?
Yeah.
Whoa.
That is dirt cheap.
That's dirt cheap. That's like cheaper than some like modern games.
Just an indie Switch tile or something.
Wow.
Final thoughts.
At the end of each and every one of our episodes, we determine whether or not the game gets our vote for New Game Plus status, which is our general thumbs up or thumbs down. It does require 2/3 of the vote to swing one way or the other. Nolan, what did you think about Quake 4?
I really think they should have stayed in their lane and only focused on the multiplayer experience. Like, look at Doom. It was quite literally just this pissed off American with guns murdering demons and nothing more, and it is sick because of that. They didn't try to do some deep story or make it realistic, and that's why Doom is so iconic. Quake was iconic too because it was the OG real deal PC multiplayer experience. And with this one, I said it didn't feel like Quake. Dude, it really, really doesn't. It's lost the charm and the sheen. Like, just go back and look at even Quake 1. Despite the worse graphics and everything, it just flowed and had its own look and feel. And this game feels like literally Halo and Call of Duty had a baby. And that's the worst thing I could ever imagine. I'm so sorry to fans, but this is a Halo ripoff. I'm so sorry. I know some of you Quake 4 fans out there are like, what are you talking about? But I made a comment last episode that I thought this was the one that everyone loved. I was mistaken. It's Quake 3 Arena, I believe. I'll probably change my thought on that too, but it's
Just keep
not
changing
this
until you get it
one.
right.
It's not this one. With the exception of a few like mechanical additions to multiplayer, I feel like it's the same as it's been, but worse because it's slower paced and it doesn't look like Quake. I can't give this NGP. My bad, but no.
Kenny?
I will agree with Nolan that this one doesn't feel like classic Quake, and that could be a problem, and it's still not my favorite choice. But despite that, I thought this one was relatively fun. For purposes of our podcast, being a little bit more campaign focused was actually probably welcome. We were able to just jump in, play a story. And it's a pretty nice little immersive single player story. It's got some solid shooter elements pinning it down, some nice voice acting. I don't know. I kind of feel like this game got a lot of crap. It's certainly not perfect, but you jump in and you get to shoot stuff, and that's what a first-person shooter is all about. Yeah, it's a little generic. It's kind of like everything else, but if you jump in and play, you're probably going to have fun because that's the kind of game that it is. So if you just want a casual FPS, even if one that's maybe a little bit uninspired or a little bit of a rip on other FPSs, and you're okay with just sort of an interesting but kind of generic story, I think you'll have fun playing this one. So I'm going to say it's a New Game Plus for me. Not an overwhelming one. This is not like a must play or anything else, but I had fun, and that's ultimately what matters in a game. And so, yeah, I think other people ought to pick it up and play it a little bit.
If Kenny can barely give it NGP.
Who would have thought Kenny is the first person shooter in the bunch? You know?
He ain't. He's
because you
lying.
got to be bad at that. Like you can't. That's like fine motor skills, right?
Yeah.
No, I'm actually halfway decent at PC first-person shooter. At certain types of first-person shooters.
I'd whoop you, boy. Any game.
Oh.
Any game. You're not.
I mean, we should
Dungeon
play.
Crawl Sunsuit?
No, any
That's
FPS.
We should play Halo 2.
Oh, Kenny thinks he
Easy.
got you.
You probably are
All right,
better than me.
I've got both of y'all. But here's the thing. Yeah.
No.
Quake.
He's actually at Halo 2. Dustin's
It used
actually
to be
pretty good.
He ain't as nice as me.
It's nice. All right, Quake 4. Outside of the graphics, when I started it, I kind of enjoyed it. It was, I military sci-fi doesn't generally work for me, just like in theory. But I kind of liked the idea of just going around and taking out aliens, trying out different guns. But I quickly discovered that this is a sleepy corridor shooter. And all of the enemies, although they might have varying degrees of health, are one and the same. Yeah. And there's no reason for exploration. I played other first-person shooters where you want to go and look over here or over there or behind this wall. Doom has a lot of hidden things around, and you explore and get rewarded for that. There's no reason to go in any other corridor in here because there's nothing. If you need more ammo or health, it's directly in your path whenever you're going to need it. There is no reason for exploration. Halo 2 and Doom 3 came out in 2004, a year before this game, and there's no excuse for Quake 4 to be this bland. And it felt like what I imagine a Call of Duty game is like, but maybe worse.
Yeah.
And there's Call of Duty fans out there. I'm not one of them. Quake 4 has a lot to be desired, left a lot to be desired, and so I don't give it my vote for New Game Plus status, which means that Quake 4 is not New Game Plus certified.
When you put it into that timeline of other games that came out before it definitely puts a little bit of perspective on quality versus other things that you could get. And yes, original Quake, finding those secret rooms and all of that kind of like next level exploration was such its heartbeat. And you had none of that. That really is a shame for sure.
It's a shame and a sham. But what did you think? We had 269 votes on YouTube. 32% said yes, 14% said no, and 54% have never played Quake 4.
It's a good spread, but wrong.
We had many viewers, listeners, people,
All of
write
those
in.
things.
Write
All
in.
of those things.
That's surprising to me.
Right in. A lot played with this
Okay.
week. Maybe it's just easy because you can just buy it and play it. I
Sure,
don't know. But
I'm down.
a lot of people wrote in. Can't include all of your thoughts. I wish that I could. Please don't be mad at us. Bro Jim said, I was going to feel bad comparing Quake 4 to modern games, but if we're considering Halo Retro for this podcast, then I call it fair. Quake 4 has one major flaw that makes it not worth playing today. It fails to find a voice.
Yes.
Classic Doom and the modern reboot capture a frantic and fun pace with massive waves of enemies. Quake 4 is slow by comparison, but instead of taking 2004's Doom 3 route and making it a horror game, filling its tense moments of exploration with story secrets and optional bits of lore, it's just a straight shot from story beat to story beat.
Yes.
No matter how you slice it, by 2005, there have been years of PC shooters that outshine this one. This had the feel like they needed another numbered Call of Duty to make the books balance. From the opening cutscene, I wanted to like this one, but it's just not worth your time or your $15 to shoot the same enemy over and over again.
It needed some salt, some seasoning.
Or some pepper, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's bland, boy.
Or some Tony Sacherais.
Correct pronunciation.
Joey said, growing up, I played a ton of first-person shooters. The factors that I look for is tight controls, good story, and shooting placement where damage is most effective. Believe it or not, some first-person shooters are jank in the fact that headshots and leg shots are equal in damage. Thankfully, this game held up in 2 of the 3 categories I care about. However, the story was extremely boring, followed by repetitive gameplay. Not sure if everyone had the issue, but the volume of the shooting and gameplay was way louder than the voice actors, which made it so annoying to have to adjust my TV volume over and over.
Yeah.
Overall, the game is a poor man's Halo and nothing to really get hyped about.
Let's go. I agree. Poor man's Halo.
Saying that gunshots are too loud is probably
No, I know what
probably
they
not the
mean.
thing that I would stake my reputation on. You know, like, oh man, my gun was louder than someone's voice. Feels probably pretty accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's this game's problem. They try to go way too real.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Not sci-fi enough or not fun enough. Keeks said, you play as a Marine on an alien planet. No, not that one. Quake 4 is inoffensive.
Yeah.
This game controls well enough, but obviously ages in its graphics and optimization, or lack thereof. With the exception of the abysmal tank levels, the gameplay is downright fun. Ooh. What this game unfortunately lacks is flavor.
Dude.
Some would say salt, some would say pepper, and some would say Tony Chacheray.
Right.
Previous entries had a gothic aesthetic. Even id's own Doom 3, my favorite franchise, has better atmosphere. With all due respect to Raven Studios, Quake 4 feels lost, halfway between military shooter and space opera.
Man, commentary's on point today. Just
On
correct. What about Slap Your Mama? You need some Slap Your Mama seasoning?
I used it last night on my gumbo.
You did?
Yeah.
Oh, that's what's up.
Garlisle. I wanted to include Garlisle's thoughts. We often do, but this game officially marks his 3-year mark with our podcast.
I'm so sorry.
Writing in every time. Yeah, he
The-
was hoping for something good and memorable.
Right.
Got this instead.
Okay, well, happy 3-year.
He says it's been fun all the way, even when games aren't so fun, which I regret to say kind of includes this week's game.
Yeah.
Quake should be good. It's nonstop action with guns blazing, which is why the single player in this game falters. Invisible walls while NPCs talk to you, long cutscenes, auto-scrollers, none of these are high-octane fun that drove Quake traditionally. And importantly, their mediocrity doesn't add positively to the experience. While the game does have stretches where it finds its roots and it's fun, they are parts instead of the whole. Add in levels that are bland and confined enough to get turned around and easily, and the interesting weaponry only appearing at the very end, and I'm just not enthused. It just makes me crave an old Quake game instead, or maybe the modern Doom titles, which capture that frantic energy better.
I mean, this was just a miss. Everyone sees
Yeah.
it. No, I haven't. No one's like, yeah, this is my favorite Quake. Maybe someone is.
And it's so true. The whole time I was like, I kind of just want to play Doom, or
Dude,
like
yes, just play Doom.
There's a problem if in Quake 4 you want to go back to Quake 1,
Doom,
which was
yes.
did not look as good and did not sound as good, and
But
in
it
some
was
ways it didn't
Quake.
play as good, but it was Quake.
And Nickelback soundtrack. Yes.
Yeah, I love that you thought it was Nickelback and 9 Inch Nails, which neither are on this game,
No.
right?
I don't. Well, I don't know. I don't think so.
Finally, Repugnant. He just wrote a poem. I thought that we could include it. Strog Marine was augmented and chipped. Our Stroggy Marine was well equipped. All of man's forces and all of man's mechs couldn't stitch up the corporal or clean up this mess. Quake 4. The end.
Stroggy Marine.
I don't know if it's a... What makes a haiku?
The
575.
Yeah. Syllables, right?
Syllables?
Yeah, the syllables.
Well, that was probably a haiku then.
Probably. I didn't... Quake 4.
No.
It's time to set aside Quake 4 and to randomly select, but guys...
What?
Not so random, but kind of.
Very random, just not as random as usual, because it is time to don your It is time to don your swim trunks and your flippy floppies because we're going to the lake. That's right. It's time for another summer pool party, which means we get our very first Patreon poll.
This is my favorite thing we do on the show. It is.
Summer pool party?
Yeah. You want me to tell them what it is?
Tell them what it is.
Every other week, there is going to be a Patreon poll. And a Patreon poll is when our patrons can submit 2 games to a smaller pool of games than the entire master list. So you have a better chance of getting a game pulled. And we play a lot of great games and a lot of bad games in a very short amount of time. And it's just hype. I just like the hype around every time we pull.
And
it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. We tend to do this once every 5, 6. We do this ever so often, but during the summer for the pool party, it's time to get wet. We're doing this every other week.
Every other freaking week.
We are going to be playing a listener-submitted game every other week. This can be you two for the low price of $5 a month on our Patreon. Go over to patreon.com/NGP podcast. We'll tell you more about it later, but for now, it's time to randomize. We've got games in here. It's a wide spread.
Okay.
Give us a taste at least.
If there were 2 games that were submitted most often, it would be Fable.
Ooh, big one.
Okay.
Which would be interesting to come back to. I hope that it holds up because I love Fable. I used to love Fable. And the other game that a lot of our community came in together to put in is called 50 Cent Bulletproof.
They've been trying to... Well, Bill has been trying for a while, right?
Bill's been trying.
And so people are rallying. Okay.
So people are rallying now.
Okay.
We've got games in here like Final Fantasy IX. We've got games in here like System Shock 2. We've got games in here like Super Paper Mario Wii. I haven't played many Wii games.
That's old enough?
We've got games in here like New Super Mario Bros. For the Nintendo DS. We've got a few Nintendo DS in here because we played DS and we haven't had the greatest experience with it, so they're wanting us to have a good experience with it. We've also just got some really, really bad games in here, like James Pond 2 RoboCop.
That doesn't exist. There's a second one?
James
I
Pond 2
kind of want to
RoboCop.
go back to the terrible puns.
Wait, it's
of
called
James
RoboPond?
Pond.
Well, what?
Yeah.
Come on.
So out of these games, we are randomly selecting now. True or false, this game determines how good or bad our summer will be.
True.
True.
True or false, this game first came out for the PlayStation 2 and Xbox in 2005.
True.
False.
It's true. True or false, this game is an action video game developed by Genuine Games and published by Vivendi Universal Games.
True. I think I know where we're going.
Don't say it genuine.
Well.
True or false, this game's story revolves around a protagonist who is a hip-hop musician searching for vengeance against the hitman who attempted to murder him.
Find me in the club. Bottle full
Maybe it is
of
Maybe it is genuine.
There's no
Guys,
way. There's no way.
It is time
There's no way.
to play 50 Cent Bulletproof.
This pool party is going to be amazing. Dude, that's so funny, first of all. 2, I think I've played it, actually. I think I had a friend go to his house. I think he had it on PlayStation 2.
There is multiplayer, so like this week, should one of us be 50 Cent, one of us be Eminem, the other person be Dr. Dre, and us just go to town?
Yeah, and make a song
Like,
in the studio.
Listen, I remember a lot of 50 Cent lyrics from back in the day. I am going to bring all of them to next week's episode.
Yeah, the candy shop lyrics,
Yeah.
I'm so
So
sorry.
yeah,
Can I just preemptively apologize to everyone for
'Cause
what
you
you're
don't-
gonna do to us?
Because you don't know any 50 Cent?
He doesn't know 50.
Right.
350.
3. Get
Wow.
out.
Don't
Get
show up
out.
next week. But our you are doing the first play for
Oh,
our new
yeah,
retro
he
game of the
is.
week. It is
Why?
50 Cent Bulletproof.
Yes,
Find a
dude.
copy and play
I
along
get
with us
this
week.
one.
Guys, you want to join the Discord during the pool party. The next few months are going to be amazing. We're going to be talking about 50 Cent, Kenny, and how Kenny raps during the first play, because he's going to do it. Go to discord.gg/newgameplus and join our community.
We want to say thank you to those of us who are on the show and supported
Radio
by those
voice?
of you who support us on patreon.com. Had to recover there, including our growing list of producers such as Adam, Marley, Antonin, Ben Brunt, Captain Protein, Dan, D.H. Bowser, Francesca, Gimbin, Joey, Jordan, J. Robert, Justin, Clint, Nick, Nat, Corey, Maximum, Mr. Lattes, Nawal, Sajan, Shauna, Thomas, Unbelievable, William, and Zion. We want to say a big thank you to Alex, who upped his contribution this week, and to Jason and Schulte, which sounds kind of like a rapper name, I guess. So that's on theme. So thanks, guys, for your patronage. And, of course, our director-level supporters who go above and beyond, Bro Jim and Garlisle. We would not be the people we are without you.
Interesting. You can follow us on our social media, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, TikTok, and YouTube. All of those links are in the show notes. Listen directly on any podcast provider of your choice. Subscribe so that you are the first to get new NGP episodes. And while you're at it, please leave a kind rating and review. Our video episode was edited by our friend Dylan, unless he has his child today. Our audio episode was edited and produced by our friend Dan Willett. Welcome back from having your child. Join us next week as we play 50 Cent Bulletproof. Bottle in the club, mama, I got what you need. Until then, I'm still half strog.
I don't even know what to say to you.
I'm the game rapper.
Yeah,
Noobs.
I got there, bro.
Okay,
I got
okay,
there.
okay.
And this has been New Game Plus.